Hello, and thank you for joining our live chat today. Our live chats each month are brought to you by Homestead Senior Care, a network of locally owned franchise offices and your trusted in-home care agency, helping you keep your aging loved ones in their home as they grow older. Before we get on to today's chat, I want to give you some reminders. We have muted all of your phone lines. You should be able to hear us, but we won't hear you, so feel free to multitask during this chat. You can enter your questions at any time by typing them into the question section on your screen. After the chat, you will receive an email that includes a recording of this broadcast, as well as the resources that we mention throughout. Now let me introduce to you who you'll be hearing from today. My name is Koehler. I'm the social media advocate for Homestead Senior Care. I have the pleasure of interacting with all of you on Facebook, Twitter, and of course these chats. I also like to keep in touch by sending you emails on Alzheimer's information that's important to you. Joining me today is Garner. Karen's husband Jim was diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's a few years ago. They have 2 children, one going into middle school and one going into high school. In fact, they're getting ready to go back to school here in just a few weeks. And Karen blogs about her experiences both at helpforalzheimersfamily.com and at missingjim.com. It isn't unusual to find Karen in Washington, D.C. advocating for Alzheimer's, or even on the sports field coaching and cheering on her kids. And Karen is also the founder of the Garner Foundation. Karen, welcome to our chat. I'm so glad you could be here to discuss social isolation with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Kat. It is definitely my pleasure.
You know, social isolation is really a big issue, especially for those families caring for someone with Alzheimer's. Homestead recently did a survey of caregivers who are providing care for someone with Alzheimer's. And the results were staggering, Karen. 74% said that since they started caring for their loved one, that they've both become more isolated from other people. And 87% of them, Karen, said that they leave the house less frequently with their loved one than they once used to. I know that you've experienced kind of that feeling of isolation, whether it's, you know, not being able to get out and do as much as you once did, or even just kind of those lonely feelings.
That is definitely true, and my natural personality is definitely somebody that's an extrovert and needs to be around other people because that energizes me and allows me to become a really happy person. I find myself to be a much happier person when I'm around others, and I tend to develop more tendencies towards a type of depression when I am by myself more often. So I'm not sure what that says about my personality when I can't be with just me, but my friends don't seem to mind being around me anyway. But so once Jim was diagnosed, we were at the stage where our kids had friends and we were trying to have people over for dinners, and we were getting invited over to dinners and maybe a sports banquet to celebrate the end of a great season or something at one of their schools. And through the years of his progression with the disease, it has become harder and harder to get myself even remotely interested in going to some of these events, sometimes for different reasons. Sometimes I just don't feel like dealing with Jim there and worrying about him, keeping an eye on him, helping him with his plate, making sure that he doesn't wander off when I'm not looking, making sure he doesn't go into the wrong bathroom or a wrong room, or maybe saying something to someone who doesn't understand the disease that could offend them. There's just so many different facets when you're in a public place that can really boggle the mind and just overwhelm you.
And part of that, Karen, let me ask, is the worry that he will do these things, or is your worry how other people will react to Jim in that situation?
I think it's both. I think even when we are in a more private social setting with close friends who know what is going on with our family, they still are not going through the same exact thing. They have watched his progression, but they don't live with him, and they have never dealt with a dementia patient before. And so there still is a lot of awkwardness there, even for people who greatly care about us and who have been with us along the whole way. And so even then, it's not just a matter of me worrying about what they think because they know that he's like that, but there is just this sadness that overtakes you seeing his decline and loving this person as he once was and witnessing his demise into a person that you no longer know, and watching your friends trying desperately to connect to him on some level, and the frustration because they just don't understand the disease. So I think and then by the end of the night you're just exhausted, and you don't want to pretend anymore. Sometimes even if
Yeah.
he's not with me, I don't feel like going and being social because let's face it, people will ask you, "How's Jim?" What's the correct answer to say? The correct answer is he's driving me crazy, or he's declining, or he's great. He has a great attitude and we're so happy that we're still able to be with him. So you have to pick the right answer for the right situation. Again, expending a lot of energy that sometimes at that very moment you just don't have. And so there's a lot of different reasons that you become socially isolated, the least of which is sometimes your friends just disappear. Sometimes they don't invite you to that dinner party anymore because it is so awkward for them. And maybe they think that you don't want to come because it would be such a hassle, or maybe they don't feel like dealing with your situation. I mean, there's so many different personalities out there in this world, and let's face it, you have friends and not all of them are the same, and some of them are going to step up to the plate and keep inviting you and understanding when you say no, and try again the following week or maybe the following month. And then some friends just disappear, and it makes you sad, but at some point you get to the point where you just don't care anymore because you don't have the energy to worry about it.
Yeah, you're you're very right. In fact, we just got a question that came in from Tom, and he said, "I love the question, 'How's Jim?' as I have so many answers to it with Linda." So he's wondering, honestly, how do you answer that question of how's Jim?
Well, I found myself earlier in the ball game being, I think, too honest because let's face it, you ask people all the time. They say, "How are you doing? How's your day today?" And you just expect the typical answer. Things are fine. I'm good. We just got back from vacation, or the kids are great, whatever. And so you typically are not looking for a real answer. But I was taking it to heart when people were asking me about Jim, and I was probably overwhelming them, talking about where he was in the disease and what it was like to be his caregiver and how it was affecting the kids. And just, you know, sometimes they stopped asking. But now I have learned to be a little bit more positive, though, and like I just mentioned, a lot of times what I try to say is, his attitude is so great because it is. He is not sitting around feeling sorry for himself. He tries to help us any way he can, although by him trying to help us, it gets us very frustrated sometimes. I have to stop myself and say, at least he's still trying. And he is looking for laughter. He's still witty and he's still trying to be part of our family as long as he can, and that means a lot to him. So I don't want it to sound like a cookie cutter answer when people ask me, because I feel like if they're taking the time to ask me, I want to take the time to give them a truthful, honest answer. And it took me a while to develop that. What is a good answer that's not negative? Because honestly, most of the time dealing with Alzheimer's is such a negative experience on so many levels, and it takes a special person to be able to see the positive. I get letters from people all the time telling me the positives of the closeness they now feel, and the pride they have caring for their loved one. And so I get a lot from those messages to teach me to be a little bit more positive. And one of the things I try to focus on is just what a great attitude Jim has and how much he's still trying, and it's nice to have him with us.
That's awesome. That's great. And Tom just said that he loves your answer. It's exactly what he's learned to do, and it changes over time, as I'm sure yours has, and continues will continue to change as well. And that being positive and with most, and telling them just a few things of what's going on. So I think that's great advice. And I always try to think, you know, start with the good, maybe throw in something that's a little more real and raw, and then end on something good, and kind of give them a little bit of a taste of what's really going on. But you also don't, want your friends, having, feeling sorry for you, and things like that, right, Karen?
As you were saying that, it was exactly what was going through my mind. Because Jim and I have been such staunch advocates for this cause, early on, I felt like I was doing a disservice to other Alzheimer's families if I tried to sugarcoat it. And I think that was part of why I was so overwhelming to people, because I felt like if I was like, oh, everything's great, we're doing wonderful, it was such a disservice, because other people who were struggling really just like we were, in the privacy of their homes, would say, wow, why are they doing so great when I am not? What am I doing wrong? How can and I don't ever want anybody to feel that way, because I struggle just like everybody else does. And so for me, I just didn't want to sugarcoat it. And not only that, when you have not experienced living and taking care of a person with a form of dementia, you have absolutely no idea how overwhelming, depressing, and hard it is on so many facets and levels. And so when I get the chance, I do feel it's important, if the timing is right, the person really seems interested. Sometimes you can sort of tell in what kind of setting you're in. I do try to take that opportunity to go ahead and open up and let people know, this is where we're at. I'm having to help Jim shower now. I'm having to help him get dressed. And every once in a while I can throw in some humor about making sure he has on clean underwear, and hasn't not growing a beard. He's not trying, yesterday was the day to wear our clothes inside out, but today's the day not to wear our clothes inside out, and then we gotta make sure the shirt's on right, or something along those lines. So I think it helps them relax when you can find a way to put humor in it. It's not always an easy way to do it, but I definitely think it's really important for other caregivers, when they are talking to their friends, or even just to strangers or neighbors or coworkers, to give them that little bit of experience of what you are feeling, not only so they can understand and be supportive for you, but so that they can understand the disease and how important it is for us to find a cure and to get more support for caregivers.
Absolutely. And Karen, I want to go. You and I had spoke earlier this year when we first began working on a new program that Home Instead is doing right now, and you consulted with us on it, on the Alzheimer's friendly businesses. And I had asked you some of, about your experiences with the gym out in the community. What were your fears? And one of the things that you had mentioned to me was, you fear that day that you're maybe in a big box store like a Costco or something like that, and you turn around and he's wandered off. And we got a question actually on our Alzheimer's Companion app from Alex. And Alex said that we're looking into getting a GPS tracking watch for my father-in-law because he has dementia. Do we have any suggestions?
Right. That is a great question. Thank you, Alex, for taking the time to write to us, and thank you for looking into safe alternatives to keep your father-in-law close at hand and not wandering off. First of all, people need to understand it is such a commonplace thing for a person with dementia to get lost in a store or lost just in their neighborhood. And the police spend actually a lot of time tracking down these Alzheimer's and dementia patients. And one of the things, just in our local community, the local sheriff's department has their own tracking device that you can get for free to put on your loved one. But there are also other organizations that offer the same technology, and there's also, like Alex mentioned, a GPS tracking watch. One thing to take into consideration is, will your person that you're caring for wear a watch? I know there's sometimes they decide they don't want this thing on. I know I had a bracelet on Jim for a long time, and he kept taking it off, which makes it very difficult. So that's one thing to take into consideration is, will your father-in-law wear the watch? Once you can establish that, there are several out there to choose from. I know that there is a group that's called Project Lifesaver, and they actually have a GPS tracker that you can get, and it's specifically for patients with Alzheimer's. It's a small PAL, Protect and Locate Tracker, and you can go to projectlifesaver.org and find out a little bit more about that watch, because like I said, it is specifically for people with Alzheimer's, and it is through a nonprofit. So that again is www.projectlifesaver.org. There are some things I also want to mention about getting a GPS tracking device of some sort is, please do not use that device to not keep an eye on your loved one. I think that can sometimes let people fall into a false sense of security, that if their loved one gets lost and so forth, it will be easier to track them down. It's not necessarily that easy, because you still have to worry about them drowning if you live close to water. You have to worry about them going into somebody else's home. You have to, and we know what can happen if you go into the wrong home. You have to worry about maybe them stepping in front of a car, and just them being scared, because a lot of times once they realize they are lost, it is very hard on them emotionally. So one thing I do encourage you is to not use it as a false sense of security, and to make sure you still are keeping a very good eye on your loved one as well. But if you Google Alzheimer's or dementia patient GPS tracking watches, there are quite a few of them out there. You can take a look at them, at their sizes, and most of them are very, very simple, and you can try to see which one you think would fit your father-in-law's personality the best.
That's some great information, and I love that you mentioned the the warning on that false sense of security. You're so right, and we all have the best intentions, and and things happen, very quickly. We had talked in one chat, I think, when we were talking about traveling with someone who has dementia, about different things that you could do, and that we brought up the tip of, before you leave, just with your smartphone, take a quick picture.
Yes.
And that way, if heaven forbid, something should happen and your loved one wanders off, you have a picture of what they're wearing, and all that information ready to go, whether it's at a store or wherever, to help staff or even emergency officials locate them.
What a great suggestion.
So, and since we all have smartphones in our hands these days,
yes,
ready to go. Okay, I have got a question here. from Michelle. And Michelle is on the chat with us today.
Hi, Michelle.
She is looking for some ideas on how to get someone with Alzheimer's out of the house. She says, these days it seems like anything I take my mom to do ends up frustrating her.
Oh, Michelle, this is a tricky one. Michelle, first of all, thank you so much for listening and for taking the time to write in. I'm very appreciative. And second of all, what a great daughter you are for trying to help your mom. It is very frustrating when you have somewhere to go and you want to take your mom, or possibly you just want to take her to get her out of the house. This is hard for me to say because I'm actually in the stage. I'm about in this same stage with Jim. And as you go through each stage, you can look back at the previous stages and recognize what you did wrong and what you did right and why you felt the way you did. But when you're immersed in it, sometimes it's really hard. But fortunately for me, I talk to a lot of people going through the same thing. And just recently, someone gave me some advice, and they said, I had to stop thinking of, and for them, it was her husband. She said, I had to stop thinking of my husband the way he was. I have to look at him and his needs now, or at the time, her husband had already passed away. And I had to readjust what my expectations of his abilities were. And so not knowing any more information about your mom and what stage she is in, my thought to you is this, and I hope I'm not overstepping here. My thought process is, if she is getting agitated when you're taking her out and she's not wanting to go, do you really have to take her? And it hurts my heart just to say that because, like I said, I'm very close to this stage with Jim. And especially if she was a very active woman and she was very social and that was her personality her whole life, the whole time you've ever known her. But unfortunately, dementia patients change once they get further along in the disease, and it causes them a lot of confusion and anxiousness, and it changes how they react to other people and their surroundings. And when they are at home, they feel comfortable. They know where everything is. They know where they are. It's quiet, usually, unless you're in my house when my kids are coming and going. And so what might be best for her at this time is to not be going out. And if she is showing the frustrations and the anxiousness, then that might be something you can either discuss with her doctor, with her neurologist, or even her personal physician, and see if maybe you need to get her some anti-anxiety medicine that will help. Right now, that's what we've had to do with Jim, which allows him to still be able to go out, and he was getting very paranoid and having hallucinations and things like that, especially later in the day when sundowning can kick in. So my recommendation to you is to really take a step back. And is she able to go out in the mornings but not the afternoons? Is she able to go to a quiet setting like a park or on a walk around the block, but she's not able to go out for dinner or maybe to something that's loud? So you might still be able to take her out, but you need to be very specific with the settings, or she may just not want to leave the house because that is her comfort zone. And unfortunately, that might be where she is, and you might have to leave her that way, but you might also be able to work with some medication in the physician and keeping track of what works best for her.
That's some great information, and I think, one of the things you touched on there, keep it simple, right? The quieter things, maybe it is just a trip to the park, something where there's not too much stimuli to, really get that anxiety going. And one of the things you mentioned was an anti-anxiety medication, to talk to the doctor about that, and make sure that, that when you talk to the doctor, that you fully understand the good and the bad that comes with that. One of our listeners, June, reminded us that many anti-anxiety medications can cause an increase in risk in falls. So make sure that you understand what is the risk of this, and is it better than what we're doing now. Michelle, you're amazing to keep trying to keep your mom included and out in the community, and maybe just looking for some alternatives to what you're doing might make it a little bit easier. So good luck. Karen, I want to, speaking of getting out of the house, a lot of us struggle with just the act of getting out the house. You've mentioned before that on occasion Jim struggles with dressing himself, and we actually had a question come in from Diane, and it actually came in through our app as well. Diane is looking for some pants or shorts that come apart at the seams versus like pulling them, up and down. She thinks that might ease some of the burden that she has, some of the dressing issues she has with her loved one. Have you any ideas there?
Well, this one I definitely had to do some research on, and because I wasn't very familiar with them. I knew they were out there, but I wasn't very familiar. So one of the suggestions that I found from doing this research was there's cheerleading shorts and pants. And I know this is another crazy one, and please don't judge me, but I was doing the research, but even some for strippers, because they use those as part of their gig, and sometimes they look appropriate enough to wear out in public. So I'm not sure you want your neighbors seeing where you're getting these pants from or these shorts from, but that is something, because they rip them off. So so those are the two suggestions that I have been able to find. And Kat, I don't know if you have another suggestion, but this sounds like it might be a great business opportunity for someone out there.
It is. And, Karen, recently I saw on Facebook, and that's a great part of my job, is I get to spend a lot of time on Facebook. There is a new line of clothing that has come out, and I'll have to track it down and get it out into an email to all of you. But it was originally designed for people with autism. And so there's no inside, outside, front, or back.